Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm so excited to welcome all of you to the kickoff for our monthly Publishers C-Suite webinar series. My name is Jake Hunley, and I'll simply be the moderator for today. For the host of the series, though, we have our very own Anne-Marie Wills, who brings over 20 years of experience in the media industry, and John French, who has served in top positions of leading media companies such as Penton Media. Today, they'll be discussing B2B buyer trends and how we can position our sales strategies to target the entire buyers collective for your advertisers. During the webinar, I do encourage you to use that Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen. I'll stick around in the background to answer any questions that you might have during it, or we'll save them for the end so Anne-Marie and John can answer them themselves. With all that being said, let's get started.
Thanks, Jake.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Thank you for coming. And by the way, Jake, that was his first experience in moderating a webinar, and he sounds like a pro already. Thank you. What we'd like to do is kind of frame this for you, and we intentionally chose for 30 minutes because we know the value of everyone's time. And this is the beginning of a series, as Jake mentioned, of 6 we're going to do. And we're going to be building some foundation here and then moving on to other topics and possibly guests as we go forward. But the bottom line is, when I was a CEO, I always was blessed with really good quality technology people and good quality technology. And of course, the people were more important than the tech itself. And the old saying is not what you know, but who you know. Well, that's become amended to what you don't know can cost you pretty quickly. And if I had any kind of stay awake at night concerns when I was running those companies, it was always, what do I not know? What's happening that I can't identify? And more frightening, what are my competition? What do they know that we don't know? And it usually revolved around evolving technology. And so I made it a kind of like my hobby to make sure I was up to speed on all of that. And that's why working these things, working with Leverage Labs and the type of technologies is so enriching, because the world is changing. And I also say that I've, over the course of my career, which has been a while, I've been witness to a lot of evolutions and a lot of changes and improvements in the B2B industry. Honestly, this one I think is the most exciting. People would say, well, it was the web coming in, it was the internet, it was the beginning of digital marketing and all that stuff. Yeah, that was really exciting. But what we're about to talk about gets to the heart of the matter. B2B media is back. We're back in control. We have much more power than we've had in the last couple of decades. And it's become evident that the brands that we serve need our help to not only identify the buyer, track them, and explain the persona and give them an opportunity to deliver the correct message in its most micro form. One way or another, I've been trying to do that for close to 40 years, and it's starting to happen right now. So it's not what you know, but it's what you don't know. And that's what we want to address and demystify all of those topics over the next series of webinars. So, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, great. Again, like John said, this is a series. Our first topic is about B2B buyer trends. And I just want to take a quick moment to give you a little context. So we're Leverage Lab. We've got folks on the call that know us and some that don't. But even for the ones who know us, I want to kind of give you a little more context of where we're coming from when we talk about these topics that we're addressing in this webinar series. So over the course of the past 6 years, Leverage Lab has been a really strong revenue partner for B2B media companies. And what we mean by that is that we are all about leveraging first-party data to its fullest extent. And our point of view around that is really around revenue producing new opportunities around marketing and advertising solutions. So we've addressed this with tons of publishers over the 6 years that we've been doing this work. Over the course of this time, we've generated $50 million in net new revenue for our publishing partners. We've done that across 20 different industries. This is a ubiquitous way to address any industry through first-party data. Our solutioning is actually a part of our capability is actually producing new projects through our production capability. So we've actually directly served more than 2,500 B2B brands. So what we're talking about today is really coming from all of the work that we do, the sales enablement, the data infrastructure, the product development, the product delivery, our point of view is really, really baked into what we're going to talk about today. So hopefully my goal is that you all walk away with kind of an aha moment because you're hearing something new. And it's coming from this rich relationship that we have in the publishing industry.
And Andrea, I might add, if we're looking for further validation of the importance of these type of topics, I think our friends over at Informer and Tech Target gave us 350 million reasons why it's important, and we'll address some of that as we go down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. So a quick agenda check-in. We're going to talk about the funnel. And I know, for a lot of people who are like, I know about the funnel. I know about the Buyers Collective. But what we're going to talk about is really through the perspective of how B2B is addressing the buyer's needs and how we're talking about and selling into what buyers are looking for. So let's start. Let's start at the basics, right? So the traditional funnel, everybody on this call knows this funnel. I want to put it into a little context around time and also the technology that supports this funnel concept. So the traditional funnel really predates really the advent of digital marketing. But let's start about 2000, right? So 2000, digital marketing is emerging as a really powerful opportunity for sellers, for our advertisers. So the traditional funnel, very basic concept. You go as wide as you can possibly go, build as much awareness across everyone. Everybody's a target. As they start to engage with you through clicks, they are starting to self-qualify. So they themselves are qualifying them into the funnel. And as they get further along, they're building more consideration. The brand is, nurturing this process and creating more consideration, more information that they're delivering to the buyer. So at some point, there's a presumption that the buyer is going to give over an email address so that now there's a direct communication that can happen, right? And then the brand takes over and starts to nurture all the way down the rest of this funnel. So I want to put this in a little context with the technology. So a lot of us know Marketo, right? So Marketo launched around 2000, and it was launched by a group of guys. One of them is one of the co-founders. His name's John Miller. John Miller, super prolific blogger, talks about the topic of B2B buying trends a ton. It's like great follow, by the way. So John is, they're building a technology platform that's really created to catch this. It's there to be the registration form, catch the prospects, nurture them, and then direct those leads over to the sales infrastructure. So at that time, we've got tech aligning to strategy. So what happened, though, about 2015 is that a whole new strategic conversation emerged. And it was about this idea of the flipped funnel. I've heard it called the flip funnel. I've heard it called marketing with fishing with a spear, not a net. Account-based marketing gets thrown into this conversation a lot, but the premise is really simple. It's this idea that when you are targeting, like people do when they go into a B2B media company, when you are targeting the right audience, we use first-party data to expand that audience to include everyone that would have a say in the buying process, what we call the Buyers Collective. So we're expanding the opportunity to include everybody that's going to have a say. We are using the first-party data to also create the right message at the right time, in the right place, and in the right channel. And then we bring people down into advocacy. They're engaged, they're interested, and that's where the supplier can then pick up and start to, nurture or take it through to a final purchase. So now let's contrast that with the tech that was going on at the time. So John Miller, I saw him speak at an event in 2015, and he said very plainly, look, the traditional funnel is dead. It doesn't work. It's too inefficient. There's nobody new in the world in terms of B2B buyers. They know everybody. There's really no way, it's a folly to think that a brand can actually do everything that the buyer needs in order to make the purchase. And he really was saying that the pendulum has shifted over to this concept of what we call the flipped funnel. And the tech went alongside of that. So John interestingly enough, sold Marketo along with his partners and cashed out in a big way, and plunked down most of his money to create Engagio. Engagio was one of the first of these ABM-based platforms. And lo and behold, Engagio was purchased by Demandbase, which is a very prevalent tool out there that marketers believe they can use to sort of build this flipped funnel concept. So I think what I'm trying to get across here with this conversation is that every B2B publisher really has the opportunity to create their own demand base within their organization, to be their own tech target. And it really just implies that they are leaning into their first party data that is well organized, well constructed, and readily available for all of this multi-channel and right message, right time, right place activation. And that we're also delivering back to our advertising partners the insights that they really want and need from this kind of work. So I think what John and I are really trying to get across here is that we're really talking about B2B publishers remembering their power and
Yep.
really leaning into their power.
Yep, and I think, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, it's another evolution of B2B, and it's an opportunity. You think about it, we controlled the messaging way back, in print days. We went to the transition to digital marketing, as Anne Marie pointed out. Then it was you go to everyone, and then we're kind of coming back the other way and using the targeted, but using the technology to do it in ways that have never been done before. So I personally think this could be another golden age in B2B for all these reasons.
Yeah, I love it. So some of the things that we want to talk about help us sort of remember our power are really the day-to-day conversations that our team is having with B2B media sellers. A lot of what we're doing to help, B2B companies go through the change and innovate around these first-party data solutions has to do with sales enablement. It's really about the messaging and how our sellers positioning the value of B2B media. So one of the first points I want to talk about, and we hear this all the time, is a seller will say, well, my advertiser just wants to talk to the decision maker, just the decision maker. Well, we're here to tell you that decision maker doesn't exist. There's no such thing as an individual decision maker anymore in B2B buying. There is a buyer's collective. A buyer's collective is a group of people who are involved in that buying process. And what we've seen in the data, and this study that we're citing here comes from Gartner. We're going to send everybody a reading list of all the material that we're covering here and where we're citing our sources. But this comes from Gartner, and it's a study that they do, a tracking study that they do frequently. And it's saying that the larger the deal, the larger the commercial nature of the deal that your advertiser is trying to sell, the more people are involved. And this for us spells just opportunity for our publisher partners to, again, expand to include and encompass that buyer's collective and provide back insights about how each of the individual people in the buyer's collective are engaging. So let's talk about the buyer's collective just really quickly. I know everybody's out there. Yeah, we know the buyer's collective. But the function of what we're trying to explain here is really that there are so many jobs that have to be done in the buying process. There's the economic information that has to be collected, the technical requirements, how users are going to consume this, this new piece of technology or this new solution. So being able to create content to align the orchestrated marketing solutions to really speak to these jobs that have to be done, not only is a critical component of how to address that buyer collective and pulling them through the process, but for media and publishing companies, it means that we're able to get more money out of these programs because we're doing versioned creative, we're doing versioned content, we're able to expand these programs to deliver more insights, across time. So it's really a function, if we look at it correctly, we're looking at it as a function of, expanding the opportunity that we have with our publisher partners and making more money out of what we do. I love this visual because this is really saying that, not only is it you've got the buyer's collective of people that have to get jobs done, but there's different phases of the buyer's journey. And what has to be accomplished at each stage is just another aspect of how we can expand the kinds of programs that we sell. So the idea that there's really 4 stages is, at the beginning of the stage, awareness building, sometimes we call it, there's this idea that we have to identify what the problem is. Like sometimes people are just like, I don't even know what it is that I need to know about this problem that I'm trying to solve with a purchase cycle. So I'm out there just trying to discover it. It's no different than if we're like, I don't know, I need to buy a new furnace. Where do I start? It's the same as a consumer experience in B2B. So there's the problem identification. There's where's the solution? Where are people having success? Like who's talking about the great success that they're having when they solve this problem? So solution exploration. What are the solutions out there for this? Then there's what's special about my problem? Well, I've got to build my own requirements. So the buyer is sitting in this place where they're having to then translate all this research that they've done into what does it mean to me? And then, and only then, are they ready to start really engaging a supplier. So again, this kind of goes back to that concept that John Miller, at Marketo and Engagio said that it's really folly to think that a brand can nurture somebody through this entire process. It's not possible. They don't have the wherewithal to do it. So a couple more points on this. This is really, again, it's just another log on the fire here, but this is evidence that when buyers are spending their time going through the buying process, they're not spending it with suppliers. They're spending it with folks like B2B media companies. This is saying that only 17% of the time that the buyer's collective spends in the buying process is spent with meeting with suppliers. The rest of the time is spent doing independent research, meeting with their own buying committee, talking amongst ourselves, if you will. So this is a really important aspect to add that additional layer of information about how critical it is for buyers to be working through B2B media organizations. This is what we're trying to get across here.
Yeah, and Emery, I would love to have this slide over the years and go back to the thousands of times I've heard, well, we know who our customer is, or our customers are loyal to us, or we educate our customers. It's just, it wasn't really true back then, but it's especially problematic today.
Yeah, and we've got so much data to prove it.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. And then it's like again, this is just another piece of information to help support the story, but 50% of the time that buyers are spending is going to independent third parties. That's us. We are independent third parties. Like more than any other sort of resource, the media property within the industry is this strong and compelling voice and an influencer, if you will, like not a Kim Kardashian type influencer, but an influencer in the industry, thankfully. So again, just another piece of wonderful information that helps us, stand in our power and know that what we've got to bring to the table is really, really critical for the buying process. And even more so, we'll talk about that in a second. So another awesome piece of information. This is, again, coming from a wonderful study. This one, again, from Gartner. And this is very recent, but essentially when buyers are buying, they are looking at third-party resources like B2B media companies and seeing the value of that resource as much more significant than what they're getting from a supplier. So they're saying that they trust a third-party resource like a B2B media company 1.5 times more than they would trust a brand source. Like this is, again, another story. So much of like what we hear in the field when we're working with sellers is like, just not having enough information to help support and fend off some of the objections that they get. And a common objection is like, well, just give me top of funnel leads and I'll nurture them myself. This is telling you that you can't. Great. So, we've been talking about standing in our power, really from the very early days of my career in the B2B media industry. I always thought, what's more valuable than what a B2B media company can say about how people are engaging with them. Like there's nothing else out there that can really lean toward intent more than what's happening within the ecosystem of a publisher. And there's a lot of noise out there right now. Everybody is positioning, even, mass compiled databases of B2B names and companies are saying they have intention signals. Like we have intent data. If you dig into that, which we have, and we do, most of it's incredibly weak. It's, signals that they're culling from internet scrapes and press releases and things of that nature. It's not the rich and valuable kind of intent signal that we as publishers have to lean into. The key here is that you have to have really well organized first-party data in order to bring that insight and all of that value to the forefront. And then it's about how do you productize it so that you can deliver on all of that opportunity and value to your market.
I think it's interesting too. Excuse me. I've worked in B2B, B2C, C, in different spectrums and stuff, Emery, and it's amazing how B2B used to be thought of as kind of not as glamorous, and obviously it's business to business. Well, you know what? Because of all the changes that have occurred on the web, on the way influencers are found, B2B or business to business is now becoming much stronger against the B2C and C, and it shows. It shows in the stats of the industry. And who else better to find influences in a marketplace than a B2B brand, because of the brand loyalty, and as you pointed out, 60% of their time is talking to third-party independents. The top of that hill should be B2B publishers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we love to say that the riches are in the niches, and that's really true. Like we've got the great opportunity and high value audiences, and if we can surface all the engagement as well, there's great opportunity there.
Now we get into a very interesting part. What I love is that we Emory's done a great job of setting up where the buyer is, how the buyer collector works, and everything else. Now it's going to be defined by a new group of buyers going forward. And I don't always love the terms of millennials and Gen Zs, but this is really compelling, guys. And 2/3 of them are now the buyers, and because they grew up in a world of Google, reviews and ratings and TripAdvisor and all that, they don't want a lot of face to face. They want to do a lot of the research on their own in ratings and all that. Where the heck are they going to go? It should be going to us.
Yeah, they should be. But here's the rub. So here's an anecdotal piece of evidence. So I was talking with a seller yesterday. So a seller with a B2B media company that we all know very well and love. So this is the kind of seller that every single one of you out there in the B2B media space would love to have, super passionate about the industry, super passionate about B2B media industry, a total student of, how buyers buy and really knows how to pitch and position her solutions. But she told me that most of her customers are in these age ranges. And they come from a place where their ideas about what media is are formed through social media. So we have a PR problem. And I think it just really focuses the light on how important it is for our sellers to really know how to position the value proposition that we bring to the table. She was talking about, well, I'm doing like back to the basics kind of videos for these folks that talk about like, what is a B2B media company? What do we do? How do we do it? They're having to be educated. I know back in the day, it used to be that you'd get a new media buyer and it was like, here you go, here's our BPA statement. And that's kind of all you had to do in order to talk about your audience. But those days are gone. Audience is defined by its engagement and how it actually engages with a brand. And if we can't talk about that and we can't articulate that and do it in a way that really educates this next generation of buyer, like there's a problem brewing. All right. So we've got a couple more minutes. I'm going to do kind of a quick summary and then we can answer some questions. So what, again, we've said it a bunch. Power is kind of the word of the day, we'd have to take a shot if we were on, some show where, here's the word of the day, but sales training and teaching our marketers how to message better is really important for this idea of standing in our power. We've got to, have our media kits and our presentations resplendent with all of the reasons why B2B media is so, so important, especially as we've got this younger generation coming in. The idea that we can align our solutions to the buyer journey stage, like that's a great first step. One of our publishers, this is a great story. One of our publishers did themselves a huge favor when it came to this whole idea of the buyer's journey and the buyer's collective within their industry. They had research, resources, and so they did a study, and they went out to their market and they said, who are the buyers? And, how are they buying, and when are they buying, and what do they use in order to buy? And they came back with this amazing, foundational piece of information that did three really important things. One, it basically identified that there were buyers in the buyers collective they didn't even know about. So that was critical. And that's a critical insight for their marketers. Two, it gave them this, incredibly valuable sort of evidence that they could take to their buying community to help them align and understand and educate them about the really, really amazing opportunity that we have with our first party data. And then three, it gave them something internally to really align around so that the editorial people understood how important it was to create content that speaks to the buyer's journey. So, aligning those solutions, sometimes it can be, it can be a bit of a trick, but it's a really critical opportunity. There's this idea, and we've seen it with publishers before, that even the editorial content that you create can really speak to the buyer's journey. Awareness building at the top of the funnel, figuring out what the problems are so that, they can continue on with their research. That can come from editorial content that maybe is syndicated into a program opportunity. Or it's original content. And we love, creating custom content. Many of us do. And then the idea that we could use maybe generative AI to version content so it can really spell a more specific, be more specific for the buyer role and the buyer journey stage. And then lastly, for all intents and purposes, it's the reporting. If the reporting doesn't tell the story, when we hand over lead lists, we're basically handing over, a list of leads, but think of all of the engagement and all the activity and everything that it took to generate that lead, and being able to show that in a place of value for your customer. Like, it's tremendous opportunity. And showing that at the account level, the individual level, being able to show how content is resonating with the buyer collective, so that marketers can do a better job of creating content, optimize what they're doing more completely. That's really what we think, the opportunities are out of this story. John.
Yeah, in 30 minutes, very good. Well, actually 29 minutes.
Yeah.
And we can take some questions. I think Jake is going to orchestrate that. But my final take is this is the foundation of setting up the next 30 minutes, which will be next month. And the topic of that will be third party cookies, demystifying them. Originally, we were going to call it "You Think You Know" third party cookies, excuse me, but do you? But we thought that was a little too controversial. So that will be the next topic, and we'll evolve these for the next 5 webinars. And we hope at the end of it, you believe that giving us 30 minutes every 30 days has been worth it, and maybe change the direction of your company.
Awesome.
Great. Well, if everybody wants to stick around, we got a couple questions that we can answer here, and then we can close it out. So the first question I have here, it's a little bit of a longer one. We've started to create packages for social ads using our own audiences. All of our advertisers seem fixated on LinkedIn. How can we convince advertisers that other platforms are just as viable?
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's something that we combat all the time. So think about it like this, LinkedIn, if it's about 100 million people that it actually reaches, Facebook and Instagram reach 10x that. So it is like the new sort of broadcast television, if you will. The opportunity also to address audiences there with your first party data is really, really amazing. So we have used Facebook, Instagram in campaigns throughout our history in the work that we do. And we find it to be incredibly cost effective, very effective from a performance point of view. So it's something to test. And that's what we really ask our publisher partners to do, is to test it and make sure that it can perform adequately for their advertisers.
Great. It's also better margins off of LinkedIn, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, well, good point.
All right. I like this next one. This one's actually really relevant to the topic today, but I understand the need to retrain the sales team with these concepts, but how about content writers? What are things to consider when producing content for advertisers that matches the buyer's collective mentality?
Yeah. Yeah. This is, again, like the best opportunity that we've seen is getting alignment with the editorial team around the concept of the buyer's journey, and then solutioning to support the buyer's journey. So, it can be pretty simple. If we've got on the editorial calendar, these are the topics that we're covering. If there's a complementary piece that really lays out the top 10 problems that are occurring around this particular topic in the industry, it can be a very, it doesn't have to be an onerous effort, but it really does complement and make the sell through of your sort of buyer stage solutions that much more meaningful.
Great. All right. I had one last question here. Our audience is primarily made up of C-suite executives. What are some ways we can grow that audience to be more inclusive of the buyers collective?
Right. So, the opportunities are pretty amazing. So, identifying those, buyers collective titles and roles that you don't have in your audience currently is a pretty easy thing to do. There are abundance of data lists and resources that you can turn to. Having high value content that speaks to those individuals to use as a draw to bring them into the community, and then using a multi-channel approach. Not everybody wants to be talked to in email. Using a multi-channel approach to hone that top of funnel and bring them into the community, super, super important. And then having a really robust sort of engagement strategy to continue to engage them in the channels that they prefer. So that's how we address it.
Yeah, I would also add, as someone who's been a recipient of all of that for a long time in the C-suite where I live, a couple things. First of all, use small words and simplify it, because we're really not that smart in this. I'm just kidding. Well, maybe. But the second thing is to make a guarantee, promise that they're not going to waste their time. And by the way, I had no idea this question was going to come up, but that ties into the whole theory behind the 30 minutes and respecting your time. If you want to target more C-suite, give them exactly what they can use in a very quick format, and then ask them, as Anne-Marie said, how do you want to engage? Ask them right up front, and then once you find them, you can put those disciplines in behind it. I'm not saying that people who work for people in the C-suite are less busy, but they're more in the weeds. When you're up here running a company, you have to make choices of what messages you're going to read, who you're going to engage with, more than anyone else in the company. And I would say just don't waste their time, and give them what they need, and ask them how they want to communicate.
We had one more question come in. And I think this is a good one too. Have you mapped buyer's journey stages to media channels, such as magazines for websites, primary channels for top of journey, research phase, newsletter for middle, etc.?
Yeah, this is a great question. So channel preference and content preference, form of content, is something that we definitely map to the buyer's journey. If you think about, the early stages of a buyer's journey being very much about solution exploration, we tend to think that short form content, top 10 lists, video content, things of that nature are really preferable by the buyers in the buyer's journey. So the placement of that kind of content in different media channels is really how we think about it. So it's content first, and then media preference second. And one of the big benefits of this first party data ecosystem world that we're talking about is that we can actually glean, preference around media channel from the people who are engaging with us. So we can get a really strong picture and a super strong signal around what channels are really of preference to individuals as they go through the buyer's journey.
All right. Well, that's all of the questions. So everyone, before you leave, I just wanted to pop up and say thanks so much for joining this webinar today. And if you didn't get a chance to ask a question, you can always reach out to us directly on our website at leveragelab.com. We'll also be sending out the recording of this webinar, and then as well as some reading lists of all of the studies that have been cited and quoted during the session. And that'll go to everybody who's registered. So if you enjoyed this first discussion, as John mentioned earlier, join us next month where we discuss how everyone thinks they know what third-party cookies are all about, but do you really? All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.